The Philadelphia Eagles have seen a lot of instability when it comes to their offensive and defensive coordinator positions in the past. I think that is a thing of the past. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Friday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I would say going back to 2017 when the Eagles won Super Bowl 52, it's kind of been a revolving door at the offensive and defensive coordinator positions. Yeah, you had some stability at the DC spot with Jim Schwartz, who was their coordinator from 2016 to 2020. But then you lose Jim Schwartz, and after that you have kind of a revolving door. It's Jonathan Gannon, and then it's Sean Desai, and then it's Matt Patricia, and now we're on to the Vic Fangio era. The offensive coordinator position, all they've seen is turnover, from Frank Reich to Mike Groh to Press Taylor to, I don't even know who the OC was in 2020. There were so many cooks in the kitchen. There really wasn't a official offensive coordinator. Then you had Shane Steichen, and then you had Brian Johnson, and then Kellen Moore, and now it's Kevin Patullo. Because of the Eagles' success, winning 2 Super Bowls in under a decade, making it to 3 Super Bowls, a lot of coordinators have gotten head coaching positions. Also, the Eagles' last 2 head coaches, Doug Peterson and Nick Sirianni, they haven't always done a great job of picking the next coordinators to replace the guys that end up becoming head coaches. And those guys, Brian Johnson, Sean Desai, Matt Patricia, going back to Mike Groh and Press Taylor, those guys, Carson Walsh, even though he wasn't an offensive coordinator, a receiving coach that got fired, those guys got fired. So they really have not had long-term coordinators in a long time. Like, either they get a head coaching job or they get fired by the Eagles. There really hasn't been much of an in-between over the last decade. But I do think that is a thing of the past. I think we know Vic Fangio is not going anywhere. I think the ship has sailed of Fangio being a defensive coordinator. Even, I think he's in Jeff Stoutland territory now, where the NFL knows he's one of the best assistant coaches in the NFL, like a top-tier coordinator. He had the number 1 ranked defense in football last year, and he also had the youngest starting defense in football. So that shows directly his impact. But I don't think what Vic Fangio presents is what NFL teams are looking for anymore in their head coach. Like, I don't think they want that old school disciplinarian, defensive-minded coach that's, in his 70s at this point? Like, I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job again. I think his one shot was with the Denver Broncos, and now he's a DC for life. I think he wants to be an Eagle for life. And so I don't think you have to worry about Vic Fangio. I think he is going to run the defense for the foreseeable future until I think he wants to retire. Like, again, I think he's in that Stoutland territory. Nobody's going to poach Jeff Stoutland to be their offensive coordinator, to be their head coach. Like, I don't think people want an offensive line coach running their franchise. But for what the Eagles need him to do, he's special. I think that's Vic Fangio. He's not going anywhere. Offensive coordinator where it's gotten murky. Again, that's the position that's had the most turnover. It's why Jalen Hurts has not had the same play caller for outside of 2 years. He had Shane Steichen for a year and a half in 2021, the second half of the year, as a play caller, and then all of 2022. Outside of that year and a half with Steichen, every single year, Jalen Hurts has had to start over with a new play caller. Will that be the reality again this year? Kellen Moore went to New Orleans, so he's lost another play caller. Will he lose Kevin Patullo at the end of 2025? I don't think that he will. I do not think he's going to lose Kevin Patullo because, I don't know, for me, Patullo isn't somebody that I think the NFL is going to want to hire as a head coach in 2026. Like, I actually think he could be the next Shane Steichen, where he is here for multiple years with Jalen Hurts. Unless, I think there's only one scenario that plays out where Patullo gets a job next year. I think it's if he completely reinvents the Eagles offense. He is so innovative and completely different from what the Eagles saw with Kellen Moore last year, what they are used to with Nick Sirianni before that, and with Shane Steichen and Brian Johnson. And let's say the offense becomes like a top 5 passing unit in the league. And not just from a quality perspective, but from a quantity perspective. Let's say Jalen Hurts is throwing 30 plus times a game. The Eagles statistically are a top 5 successful passing offense. Jalen is an MVP candidate. Maybe he wins regular season MVP. Let's say they're winning because the passing game is just so good, kind of like it was in 2022. And I don't think this is out of the realm of possibilities, but I think it's unlikely with Saquon Barkley and with the success you had last year. I don't think they're going to completely throw out what they did last year. But let's say they did that. Let's say they became an elite passing offense this year, and they did it at a high volume, at a high clip. That is when I think Kevin Patullo, and they're competing for Super Bowls. They're competing for a championship this year. That is when I think Kevin Patullo would potentially be poached by another team. And he does have good experience as somebody that's worn many different hats for Nick Sirianni as an assistant head coach. He's done a lot behind the scenes from a game planning perspective. He helped merge 2 different philosophies on offense with Sirianni's scheme and Kellen Moore's scheme last year, leading to what was a Super Bowl winning offense. If he also has success as a play caller this year, yeah, maybe a team does poach him and say, that's the guy we want. But I think it's unlikely because, number one, it's his first year as a play caller. I think teams like a guy that's had some more experience in that. Kellen Moore, before Philadelphia, had a lot of success in Dallas and LA. So he already kind of had a leg up in becoming a head coach. He was already seen for years as a riser, as a future head coach, a former quarterback turned great play caller turned head coach. So even though Kellen Moore was only with the Eagles for a year, he had a lot more experience than Kevin Patullo does. And if their offense is pretty much, even if it has success in 2025, if it's in the same way it worked in 2024, where they're running more than any team in football, maybe they're still a very efficient passing offense, but they're like 28th in passing attempts this year. I mean, last year they were 32nd in the regular season. If they do it the exact same way, I don't think an NFL team is going to poach Kevin Patullo. I think you can bank on him at least being Jalen Hurts' play caller in that scenario for a couple years. Because if it happens, if it works the way it did last year, I think a lot of NFL teams will see the success of the offense, see the success of the scheme as something player-driven, something that is specifically Jalen Hurts' offense. Like, oh, even though it's different play callers every year, the offense doesn't change because this is the Jalen Hurts offense. Like, this is what Jalen needs. This is what he wants. This is tailored to Jalen Hurts specifically. And Kevin Patullo is just another cog in the wheel, just keeping the ship on course. It's really an auto drive. Like, you know, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni set the course years ago, and now the new coordinator's just got to make sure the boat goes straight, right? Unless, again, he completely reinvents it. I think even with success, if it's similar to last year, Patullo's not going anywhere. I think it's more likely that Kevin Patullo isn't the play caller in 2026 because he actually didn't work out this year. I think it's more likely that, and I'm not predicting that, but I think it's more likely he suffers the fate of Mike Groh and Brian Johnson more so than becoming a head coach. I just don't think it's realistic. I think the Eagles will have success again in 2025 on offense. I think it's going to be a top 5 offense in football. I think they will be competing for a Super Bowl this year, but I don't think it's going to be all that different than how they were doing it last year. And for me, that's just not going to be enough, I think, for an NFL team to say, all right, let's do it again. Let's hire the Eagles offensive coordinator. Also, if you look at the track record of a lot of these guys, they haven't had a lot of success as head coaches. Frank Reich hasn't had a lot of success. Jonathan Gannon. We'll see what happens with Kellen Moore, but it hasn't always worked out. So, you know, Shane Steichen hasn't really worked out that well in Indianapolis. That could also be a reason that Patullo stays put. And so I do think the Eagles, although it's frustrating every year they have a new play caller, that's why I want my head coach to call plays. I do think maybe that's a thing of the past that Patullo should at least be here, maybe not for years and years. I think eventually he'd get a head coaching job if the Eagles continue to have success with him calling plays, but at least for 2025 and 2026, if he does have success in the way the Eagles have had it in the past, and it's not something completely new and different, I think he's your OC for a couple years, which is good because the Eagles could use some stability finally for Jalen Hurts when it comes to who his play caller is for the Philadelphia Eagles offense. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, Winning a Super Bowl again, repeating, is obviously the number one thing we're rooting for the Eagles in 2025. But I have a rooting guide for you, things that I'm looking for specifically that I'm rooting for this year that's going to keep me fresh, feeling fresh for another Eagles season despite another championship. How are we not going to get complacent in 2025? I'll tell you how coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. For me, managing my money is something that's really important that I haven't always done a great job at. Spent, past tense, although I still fall victim to it. Monarch Money has helped me save a lot more, seeing how much I was spending on food delivery services, online shopping, entertainment, just so much money being spent in those different ways. Now I've taken control of my finances, and you can too with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL in all capital letters at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. So I've been thinking a lot about this throughout the offseason. The closer the 2025 season gets, and I'm not saying I'm not excited for 2025, but I was actually saying this on our squad show earlier today. No, I was saying it on another podcast that I was a guest on the other day. It's not that I'm not looking forward to the 2025 season, but I'm kind of sad and I'm not in a rush to end the 2024 offseason because it feels so good being the reigning Super Bowl champions. Like, the fact that the last game the Eagles played was a dominating Super Bowl win, a revenge game over Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. That game was just so perfect, stopping a three-peat, stopping another dynasty like you did with New England in 2017, getting another ring. It was just so special. And I know the minute a new season starts, like, 2024 is a thing of the past. It wasn't the most recent season. And before you know it, like Super Bowl 52, it feels like just yesterday that just happened. And yet you blink and it was, 8 years ago at this point? It's almost been a decade since the Eagles won their first Super Bowl. So time flies, and I don't want Super Bowl 59 to be just a distant memory again. And that's the way life works. I know that's the way time works, but that's why I haven't really been in a huge rush to get to the season. And I was thinking about that. And I thought to myself, like, how do you, because you've won 2 championships in under, in 8 years, you've been to 3 in under a decade, how do you keep feeling motivated and fresh, energized for a new season to climb that mountain every single season when you're a successful franchise? And I'm not talking from a player perspective, but actually from a fan perspective. Like, how do you not feel like your cup is full and you find new things to root for? It's not the same thing over and over again. I think one of those things that's new and fresh for 2025 is the idea of going for a repeat. That's something the Eagles have, although they've won 2 championships, they've beaten the GOAT quarterback multiple times. They've beaten all-time great quarterbacks in shootouts. Like, we've seen a lot of the same successes. One thing this Eagles team has never done, or this team in this last decade has never done, is repeat. Only a few teams, I can count on my one hand, have repeated in the history of the NFL. Only 2 teams have repeated in the 21st century. So checking that off the list would really make this team look like a dynasty. When that puts the Eagles in a new stratosphere of NFL history. So obviously, like, that's the number one thing to root for, is a repeat would put you in a dynastic conversation. And that's something that we have never experienced. Like, I don't know what it's like. I mean, this has been the golden era of Eagles football. The fact that we've watched 3 Super Bowls in under 10 years feels surreal, but if they win 3 Super Bowls in a decade, they win back-to-back championships, and this current core becomes a Patriots or Chiefs level dynasty, that is something that keeps things fresh. But there's also some individual things that I'm rooting for in 2025 that really do make me excited for the upcoming regular season. And one of them is, talking about checking off new boxes, I am rooting hard for Jalen Hurts to win regular season MVP. Just think about it. Jalen Hurts is pretty much at this point done everything a football player could do. And not just in the NFL, but college. Like, he's won a national championship, even if he wasn't starting. He was a big reason Alabama won a national championship. He started in multiple national title games. He won multiple SEC titles. He was a Heisman runner-up. He's been to the playoffs over and over again in the NFL. He's going to break rushing records. He's Super Bowl MVP. He has a ring now. He was an MVP runner-up. Like, he's done so much in his career. Statistically, he's posted some insane numbers. His win percentage all time is up there with the likes of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Joe Montana. What's one thing Jalen Hurts hasn't done in his career? What's one thing also that could really silence the critics? Because even winning Super Bowl MVP last year still didn't really shut up the Jalen Hurts critics. There's still so many people that say he's a game manager, like he's a system player, he's carried by an elite nucleus on offense and defense. If he goes out this year, and maybe they still won't give him the credit, maybe Jalen Hurts will just never get the credit he deserves, but if he goes out there and wins regular season MVP over Patrick Mahomes, over Josh Allen, over Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, and even Saquon Barkley, his own teammate, and he posts some insane numbers this year where he throws for, over 4,000 yards, throws for 25 plus touchdowns, runs for 700 on the ground, and has double-digit rushing touchdowns again. Like, if he has that kind of year, then that's it. Like, I don't know what else you can say about Jalen Hurts. It's like the one thing that he really hasn't done, and he came so close in 2022, and you can make the argument he should have won MVP that year over Patrick Mahomes if he doesn't get injured, but that's the one thing, like, he really hasn't checked off. If he wins regular season MVP, like, I really want that for him because, number one, the Eagles haven't ever had an MVP. They've been close with Vic being a runner-up and Carson Wentz and Randall Cunningham, but they haven't had a winner. So I want that for the Eagles. It's something they've never had. And also, I want it for Jalen Hurts because then what are the critics going to say, right? I just think that would really silence this conversation once and for all. Another thing that I'm really looking forward to is the role of Jihad Campbell on defense. Like, I've been really excited about rookies heading into their first year. I've been excited about a lot of guys in the past. Like, obviously last year with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Obviously Carson Wentz in 2016, Devontae Smith and Jalen Carter. Like, there's been years that I'm super excited about rookies. But this year is a little bit different because the Eagles, as I've said on the podcast in the past, they've never had a player like Jihad Campbell. This is a Micah Parsons style of tweener Swiss Army knife player on the second and first level that they've never had. Like, they've had versatile safeties that can play corner, corners that can play safety, linebackers that can play like a dime linebacker that can play safety, but they've never had this roaming pass rusher that can also cover, that can be really effective against the run, that can rush the passer on the edge. They haven't had this type of versatile weapon. At least in the Howie Roseman era, they've never had this guy. They've had some incredible defensive stars, but and again, we'll see if Jihad Campbell actually pans out. I loved Isaiah Simmons coming out of Clemson years ago for the exact same reason as I loved Jihad Campbell, and it didn't work. He didn't really master any one position, and he wasn't really great at any of them. So we'll see if it pans out, but the potential of Jihad Campbell, the ceiling, the style of player he is, makes me so excited for 2025 because I just want to see how Vic Fangio uses him. And I have faith in Fangio to use him correctly and creatively far more than I would have trusted somebody like, the Eagles would have never drafted this kind of player for Jim Schwartz or Jonathan Gannon, right? There's a lot of coordinators out there that wouldn't want to use Jihad Campbell. For the same reason teams didn't want to draft Cooper DeJean, because if they can't figure out exactly what he does best, some teams see that as a negative, whereas I think the Eagles see that versatility as a positive. So watching Jihad Campbell in 2025, that's another big reason I'm excited about this year. Another one for me, and this one's kind of more of a niche nerdy one, but I can't wait to see Jahan Dotson in year 2. And again, is he going to have a massive role in the offense this year? No. But I do think he's going to be in for a much bigger role than last year. I do think the Eagles are going to throw more. I think Dotson is going to build off of that momentum he built in the playoffs with Jalen Hurts, that chemistry he built, scoring that touchdown against the Packers, making those 2 big explosive plays in the first quarter of the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. Like, this is a former top 20 pick in the NFL draft, a former first-round pick that I really liked. He was a my guy for me coming out of Penn State in that 2022 NFL draft. So he's already one of my favorite players, and I personally would love to see him have a bigger role this year. And I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. He's gone after this year. Even though the Eagles declined his fifth-year option and he's a free agent in 2026, do you think it's crazy? Like, do you really think Dotson, even if he has like 400 yards this year, a team's going to cash in and pay him like a top 2 wide receiver for their offense? I don't think so. I think the Eagles could make a very competitive offer to keep Dotson for the future and keep him with that trio of him, Brown, and Smith. And if he has a really solid year this season, I think that could happen. I'm a big fan of Dotson. I think the playoffs showed that he's not a Quez Watkins, that he's not getting the ball, not because he doesn't get open, he can't produce. It's more so because of the weapons in front of him. And I think that's the case. He proved that in the playoffs. And I think the playoffs showed the Eagles that they can rely on Dotson and use him more this year. And I think they will. And that's more of a zoomed in, nerdy, niche reason I'm excited for 2025. But hey, I'm excited to watch Jahan Dotson in year 2 with the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we will wrap up this Friday edition of the show. My Mount Rushmore for the Eagles was completed and posted by the Locked On Podcast Network today, and I got some pushback, especially by older Eagles fans. I'll defend it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, we are wrapping up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. So our Locked On Podcast Network social media accounts today, we're posting all of our Mount Rushmores for our entire Locked On NFL channel. So for the top 4 players all time, that maybe not the 4 best players in franchise history, but the 4 guys that maybe it's based on individual talent, stats they put up, team accomplishments, the collective of all of that. Who are the 4 all-time Eagles? When you think of the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the 4 all-time players that belong on that Mount Rushmore that should represent this franchise's history? My Mount Rushmore was, and I'll post the graphic for our YouTube viewers, Jalen Hurts, Brian Dawkins, Lane Johnson, and Brandon Graham. I feel very confident in that Mount Rushmore that I created. However, I got some pushback, especially by older Eagles fans that say, oh, you've clearly only watched the Eagles post-2010. And while that's true, I am a younger Eagles fan, so I definitely do have recency bias. I think I have every right to be biased towards this era. This is the golden era of Eagles football. This is the era where they've made 3 of their 5 Super Bowls. This is the era they've won both of their Super Bowls. I think it's very justified in having Jalen Hurts on there, Lane Johnson, and Brandon Graham. Now, can you make the argument that Reggie White belongs on there? Sure. Can you make the argument that Chuck Bednarik should be there? Or heck, even Jason Kelsey should be up there? Yeah, absolutely. You could totally make the argument for those guys, or Steve Van Buren, or Harold Carmichael. There's so many guys that you could put up there. For me, again, this is the golden era of Eagles football. Jalen Hurts is the greatest quarterback in franchise history. He has been to 2 Super Bowls for you. He has won 1. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He outplayed the second best quarterback, in my opinion, in NFL history, both times in the big game. He's going to be your most winningest quarterback when it's all said and done in franchise history. I think he's going to shatter every Eagles quarterback record there is to be had that is set to be broken. Jalen Hurts should absolutely be on there. Oh, by the way, he's only 26 years old. This guy still has 4 years to go before he's 30, and he's already accomplished all of this. He's taken you to the playoffs every year that he started. So I don't think you're going to debate Jalen Hurts being taken off that list. And yeah, Brian Dawkins is an all-time Eagle. When you think, if you were going to build a Philadelphia Eagle player in a lab, it's Brian Dawkins. And he was the leader of that first golden era that went to 5 NFC championships and a Super Bowl. So Brian Dawkins is that one guy from a different era that I put up there. But it's recency bias maybe, but Lane Johnson, I think, is a top 5 tackle in the history of the NFL. He has been a part of all 3 Super Bowl runs. He's been a part of 2 rings. He went on one of the most dominant runs in NFL history for a tackle, where he went 3 to 4 years, or at least 2.5 to 3 years, where he didn't allow a single sack. A sack on the Eagles quarterback was not his fault. He's always one-on-one. He never gets help. He's been a part of this team for 12 years as a captain. He was part of that big 4 with Kelsey, Cox, Graham, and Lane. Like, I think it's very obvious Lane Johnson should be on this list, even over Jason Kelsey. What he's doing, even into his late 30s, he's still, I think, the best tackle in football, and he's been that player for 10 years. I think Lane Johnson absolutely belongs on this list. And Brandon Graham, yes, is he better than Reggie White? No. Is he even better than the best season of Hassan Reddick or Trent Cole or maybe even Clyde Simmons? Like, no, statistically, no. But Brandon Graham is he's the longest tenured Eagle in the history of the franchise. Nobody has played more games in Eagles history. He's the only guy, or outside of Lane Johnson, from both of those eras that won both Super Bowls. He's one of the best vocal leaders, one of the best leaders in Eagles history. And I think he's also one of the most underrated pass rushers of this era. Like, efficiency-wise, yeah, he only had one double-digit sack season, but he was always up there with pass rush win rate, pass rush grades, always had 7 to 9 sacks a year. He was a great run defender. And oh, by the way, he made I'm burying the lead here. He made the biggest play in Eagles history. He sacked Tom Brady, strip sacked him to win the Eagles' first ever championship. So I don't know that you can make a better argument for any other Eagle than these four. I think I nailed it, and people don't agree, but that's fine. I think Jalen Hurts, Brian Dawkins, Lane Johnson, and Brandon Graham, those are your four all-time Eagles. And I'm very confident in that Mount Rushmore. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on X at DiBiase. Our show page is at Locked On Birds. You can also hit us up on our YouTube community page at Locked On Eagles on YouTube. We're going to sign off for today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen. We're back to each and every day, Monday through Friday next week. So subscribe on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Until Monday, thank you so much for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.